So while you are doing the survey, everyone is doing the survey, I want to just introduce Daniel. Yeah, is an AI strategist and prompt engineer. Actually, I met Daniel at a conference this year, and what struck me is his passion, for technology. He's currently the director of the Artificial Intelligence Laboratory at Talisis in Mexico. And he's conducting research and developing solutions to address any technological evolution. And currently he's looking into prompt engineering as well, and the use of AI. Yeah, so yeah, just take some time to complete that survey. And
so
then
if you have already scanned the QR code or visit the link, and you're filling up the survey, let me begin with the presentation of the workshop, all right? So this will be the workshop for today. We'll be addressing prompt-oriented behavior, which is the focus of my research project for my doctorate, all right? So we have to define other concepts and revisit some other applications of AI technology in order to furthermore define the concept of prompt-oriented behavior. All right, so this is a program for today. We'll be addressing prompting 101 from basic to advanced, advancing furthermore on prompt engineering, advanced prompting, and of course, ChatGPT roleplay, which is the best example of how prompting becomes an activity and an action, all right? And we'll end with the definition of POV, or prompt-oriented behavior. And if we have time, hopefully we can address digital twin activity, in which you guys will perform and design your own digital twin. All right, so without further ado, this is the survey for the workshop. I will ask you to kindly scan the QR code or visit the link. And please answer the questions in the order I will be presenting them, all right? Do not advance on the questions, and try to address them in the order that we will be uncovering on the presentation, all right? And again, you have to input your birth date, since it will be your identification to track your answers in both forms, all right? So are you guys ready? Excellent. Muy bien, so first, what is prompting? And I want you guys to think, what do you perceive prompting as? Or how do you perceive prompting as an action? How have you been prompting yourself? How was the concept of prompt or prompting presented to you? What do you understand? How do you perceive it? Because this will be very important in order to establish what our perception and what the actual definition of these concepts are. Because this technology has been so widely adopted and so massively presented that most people have had some approach to prompting, but that does not mean that they know what they are doing or that they are doing it correctly, all right? So if you have already answered what do you think prompting is, let's define the concept in order to advance with the presentation, all right? So in short, prompting is communication. And this is a very specific concept that we have to address, because we're talking about the transfer of information from one point to another at a cognitive level. Whenever we are interacting with LLMs or AI platforms, we are actually communicating information at a cognitive level, all right? So this prompting phenomenon began in 1948 with Alan Turing when he presented the concept of intelligent machinery, all right? And then in 1950, he presented computing machinery and intelligence. And something very interesting happened in this period of time. The concept of unorganized computers arise. What are unorganized computers? Were basically computers that do not have a specific protocol to follow, and rather have the ability to choose their own protocol, basically taking decisions, all right? But then if we go back a little, in 1938, Claude Shannon presented the paper as a symbolic analysis of relay and switching circuits, which was basically the beginning of what we know of binary communication. This concept of having an on and off electronic rail for information transferring was designed and addressed in this paper. And then the breakthrough happened. In 1948, Claude Shannon presented a mathematical theory of communication. We, as humans, were presented to this paradigm shift in which now we had to define communication at the mathematical level for a computer to be able to process it. We're not translating for another human being. We're not translating to another language that we don't know. We were actually using math as a communication method. And this is the beginning of what we know as prompting, as you will see, because this is early stages. This is 1948, 1950, 1938, 1948. But then what happens after that? Well, computer language began to popularize and being developed and used. So assembly language was the first one to arise in 1949. And then the other usual suspects came along, all right? So we have BASIC, Pascal, and of course, C. All of them in 1964, 1970, and 1972, respectively. And then the breakthrough happened again. 1983. What happened in 1983? Well, Thomas Morton and Alan Newell and Stuart Card presented the psychology of human-computer interactions, all right? Computers were no longer just a tool. They were actively interacting with other humans, so much that we were in need of designing and developing different languages to communicate with computers, all right? So first of all, we're noticing this pattern of communication being at the center of this whole revolution and phenomenon, all right? So let's jump back to 2011, the AI interactions popularization, all right? We have Apple releasing Siri in 2014, Amazon releasing Alexa, and of course, in 2016, Google launching Google Assistant. And then the breakthrough happened, 2017. Attention is all you needed. The transformer model was presented in 2022, and it was the foundation for OpenAI releasing ChatGPT. All right, so it's undeniable that communication, it's at the center of this process, this evolution, and this new paradigm. All right, so once we have understood that, we can see that prompting began with computer communication, then computer language, human-computer interactions, AI interactions, and what we have today and what we know as conversational interfaces. And this is very interesting and important. If you guys have ever used Excel or Word or PowerPoint, have you ever noticed how many menus are at the top of your screen? How many menus these platforms, these tools have for us to interact with them? There are so many menus, all right? And then think back and compare that to Google Gemini or ChatGPT and notice how little menu this platform has. And it's not because it does not have the possibility to perform different actions or to serve us in different ways. It is because we no longer need a button for an interaction. We can communicate through interactions, all right? So that's the arising of the conversational interface. And that's what we'll be addressing today, communication, all right? So what's prompting? Prompting is communication. But in order to address prompt-oriented behavior, we have to talk about prompt engineering. And even though it might seem very basic, let's try to define what is engineering, all right? So if you could please refrain to the Microsoft form and try to answer what to you it's engineering, whether it is science, whether it is an art, maybe it's an action, maybe it's a school of thought. Whatever engineering is for and to you, please share it with us, all right? And it doesn't matter if it's brief or a little bit longer, doesn't matter, please try to share your thoughts on the matter, all right? So while you're writing, let's try to uncover what is engineering, all right? So engineering, at its most basic definition, is the use of science and technology to solve real-world problems by designing, improving systems, structures, and processes, all right? So as you can see, it's not that the definition, it's one thing, one word, or one action or activity. it's rather a compound of different approaches to what? To problem solving, all right? So engineering is the technological and scientific aspect, and of course, systemic approach to problem solving. And this will come in handy now that we have to advance and try to define what do you guys think prompt engineering is? Because whatever prompt engineering is, it certainly must be linked or related to prompting and engineering. So help me on the survey and try to answer, what is prompt engineering to you? How it has been presented to you, how it has been explained by someone else. How have you been experiencing this phenomenon now that you're having or getting a grasp on the definition of the concept? What is prompt engineering? And this is quite interesting because this is a new concept. It's not widely known. Most people think and will tell you that they know what prompt engineering is, or they will tell you that they are familiar with the concept. But once you start asking the definition or their perception on the concept, you start noticing that there are some differences. So if you have already answered what prompt engineering is for you, let's advance and discover what it really is. Prompt engineering is the process of crafting and refining communication with AI models, all right, to optimize their responses, using problem-solving and conversational skills to guide the system in producing accurate and relevant answers and outputs. And this is the part in which communication becomes important, because we are very good at designing steps or instructions or even orders, all right? And we might have a very well-defined and structured critical thinking approach to problem solving. But when it comes to communication, we have to ask ourselves, do I really know the difference it makes to place the comma here or there? And that's a very simple example, all right? How can we let these large language models know exactly what we're thinking, exactly the idea that we are approaching, or the concept that we are presenting? And it comes down to communication. The better communication we have, the better communication skills we have, the better we can use these tools, because it's now not a matter of programming or coding, as we have all seen in recent news. It's about communication, a very human skill, one which, unfortunately, not many people have. Not many people knows how to ask a question, how to present a question, how to pay attention, how to address a topic, or even how to properly write in order to express their ideas. So that's prompt engineering. How can we define it even at its core? Well, prompt engineering is the systematic approach to problem solving with prompts, right? So it's this question or action of asking yourself, how can I solve this problem or this situation through prompting? And when you place that situation in your mind, that context in your mind, you start thinking about communicating in the clearest way possible, all right? In order for any large language model to understand what you're saying and not be confused. The responsibility of the usage of this information relies on the human aspect of this interaction. So we have to be very good at communicating in order to be proficient at prompt engineering, all right? But here is where it gets interesting. Are you guys familiar with Kaizen, the concept of Kaizen? I'm sure you have heard it at least once. So let's try to define it in order to approach another concept that's going to be pivotal in understanding how conversation is furthermore not only important, but fostered in these interactions, all right? So Kaizen is a Japanese philosophy focused on continuous improvement through small incremental changes, all right? Aimed at enhancing processes, efficiency, and quality over time. So now that we know what Kaizen is, what might Kaizen prompting be? And this is quite interesting because Kaizen as a philosophy can be applied to different actions, all right? It's not a squared or controlled definition. It's an application that can be applied or adapted to different actions. So let's try to address Kaizen prompting. And that would be that Kaizen prompting blends this philosophy, Kaizen philosophy, with prompt engineering, where the AI-driven interactions are refined and adjusted through ongoing prompts. The goal is to iteratively seek better solutions and insights using AI feedback to progressively optimize problem-solving processes. This approach fosters continued improvement in how prompting is used to tackle complex tasks, all right? So this will be furthermore expanded along the way in this workshop, but we have to think, are we asking LLM or large language models to perform actions for us to then perform actions on their deliverables? Or are we looking for ways in order to avoid or minimize our involvement in these actions, all right? So it's not so much that we do not have to do anything. It's about automating the right processes, all right? And it's about a very simple question that we'll be addressing furthermore, which is, do we adapt our behavior to our objectives? Or do we adapt our objectives to our behavior? That's at the core of this research project. How do we process the prompting phenomenon? And Kaizen, it's an amazing philosophy to attach to this phenomenon, because it implies that we are constantly improving. Try to think of how do you communicate with others. If you have a lifelong friend or acquaintance or family member which you have a lot of communication with, you can communicate at a very basic level. Very little words are exchanged, and the idea it's completely cut because you have this familiarity of communication, this understanding. But then try to compare that with how you communicate with new people. When you are meeting new people, you have some doubts of how to address some topics or how to advance in the conversation, or to, let's say, assume what they do or do not know about something and what type of disclaimers you have to present. That's how Kaizen prompting happens, how this communication can be improving itself a long time through the repeating of prompting with an LLM, all right? The more we interact, the better we become at it. And that's Kaizen prompting, all right? So do we have any questions so far? Are we having a good time? How's everything going back there?
Okay.
Amazing. Okay, so let's continue. Now that we know what prompting is, what prompt engineering is, and what Kaizen prompting is, let's address some advanced concepts, which is, what is a prompt? Sorry, how do you prompt? So I'm sure you all have been using ChatGPT or Gemini or Copilot or any form of AI model or large language model. But that does not mean that we know what we're doing. And this is explained with a very, very simple and amazingly clear question. I'm sure you all have been using or are familiar with Google, right? But even though, and despite we all use Google, that does not mean we took a Google course, that someone taught us how to use Google, that we are using Google correctly. It only means we are satisfied with the reaction our actions have in this platform. And it's a little bit like this phenomenon in which in the early 2000s, let's say 2011, 12, or 13, people were amazed about how little toddlers were able to use tablets, specifically iPads. And people thought that the fact that a toddler was able to use a tablet meant that the toddler was a genius. When in fact, the real genius was the designer at Apple, which made the tool so easy to use that even a toddler was able to use it, all right? So we have to be very clear that using a very specific tool, platform, or service or product does not mean that we know what we're doing, all right? So ask yourself, how do you prompt? And try to answer and share your answer through the survey, all right? So we have different approaches to prompting or how to address prompts. We have prompt templates, we have prompt calibration, and of course, we have conversational prompting, all right? We will be addressing each of these concepts, and let's begin with prompt templates. This is a very simple template that I designed that has led me to amazing results. It's very simple, but of course, can be more complex, and you can add further information, you can add further levels of complexity. But at its core, prompt templates can be defined, or my prompt template can be defined as ICIO. Very simple, 4 letters, it's an acronym, ICIO. What does that mean? Well, ICIO means instruction, context, input, and output. It's very simple. It's a very simple structure that can help us deliver, or at least think twice about what we want to communicate based on a structure, looking for the missing parts, the gaps, in order to communicate better, to transfer information at a better pace, in a better way, clearer and understandable. All right? So let's see this template in action. All right? And I want you guys to think of any prompt that you have performed recently, whether it was something simple, something complex. Try to think about the prompts that you have been doing recently and try to compare it with this example and this template specifically. Remember, instruction, context, input, and output, all right? So here's the example. Create a script covering 2,000 words meant to be used for another AI platform to create an audio file. Use the following PDF as the source for the content and deliver in a conversational form with introduction, debate, and conclusion format, all right? So, first of all, this seems very simple, but this is what we call a prompt. We are actually communicating an idea. We are actually establishing instructions. We are actually establishing how do we want this LLM or AI platform to perform? What do we want to receive, and how do we want it to be presented? All right? Most people think that just asking a question constitutes as a prompt. And even though basically it is, well, it's not even a sentence. Most people are using prompts just like keywords, as a rambling, as a nonsensical way of communicating. And that's the point. We are human beings. We have cognitive functions. We can communicate better with an understanding model. We have to try to use AI the way it was meant to be, for us to be communicating with another human being or another technological advancement that can replicate human communication. So we should be communicating as humans, with long sentences, with big and complex ideas being presented in a conversational way. All right? So if you have seen this example, it's going to be very clear how it adapts to the template, because we have the instruction, create a script covering 2,000 words. We have the context, meant to be used for another AI platform to create an audio file. We have the input, what we are providing for this task. Use the following PDF as the source for the content. And at last, how do we want to be served? How do we want this information to be presented? Of course, the output, what the deliverable is going to be. Deliver in a conversational form with introduction, debate, and conclusion format. So it's very simple and obvious to notice how a simple question and this specific template are very different when we are asking what constitutes as a prompt. All right? And this is going to be very useful for you guys. Every time you're interacting with an AI platform or LLM, try to ask yourself, am I missing something? Because fewer prompts, fewer words, fewer enters means we are communicating better. It means less situations in which we have to tell ChatGPT, why are you doing this if that wasn't my instruction? It means less situations in which we have to ask ourselves, why am I using ChatGPT if it's not understanding my problem or not serving my purposes? We have to mitigate these situations through communication. That's the only way we can achieve that. So this is the prompt template, ICIO, instruction, context, input, and output. But then we have prompt calibration. This is RACA, all right? RACA means relevant, accurate, complete, clear, coherent, and appropriate. This is a very simple tool to calibrate prompts, to evaluate prompts, because most of the time we are amazed on how these platforms or these products behave. Whenever you're interacting with ChatGPT, just reading what ChatGPT is telling you, it's amazing by itself. We can be blinded by these amazing technological advancements and not pay attention to what's really important. Sometimes we don't even have our objectives well defined, so we cannot measure the answer. We're just amazed on how coherent it sounds, on how fast it performs, on how human it seems. So let's try not to be blinded by this and instead apply some systemic approach to how to evaluate these elements. So we have an interaction here. Can you share the QR code again? Sorry, yes. I'm going to share the two QR codes. This is for the registry of the workshop. This is very simple information. It's not going to take that much time. Let me know if you have already scanned the QR code to go back to the other presentation, and then we can present to you the next QR code. It's a two-survey process. One is for the registry, and the second one is for the whole workshop, all right? Can I move to the other one? I can give you time, don't worry. So if you have already covered and filled the registration survey, we can go back to the workshop survey, in which you will have to then, again, scan another QR code, all right? So I'm gonna move to the other QR code, all right? And it's here. Let me go back. It's here. You just have to enter your birth date, which is your identification, to link your behavioral data with your registry data for the workshop, and then begin answering so far the questions that we have covered, which is we can address them specifically. So if you have already scanned the QR code or visited the link, we began with what is prompting. Then we ask what's engineering. Then we ask what is prompt engineering. Remember, there are no right or wrong answers. I just want to know what your perception of this concept is, all right? So try to be completely honest and don't worry about right or wrong, all right? So afterwards, we define prompt engineering. We advance to asking, how do you prompt? So try to think if you have a specific format or approach or methodology, or if you're just interacting, asking questions, or having conversations, or entering or inputting information with these large language models, all right? And we were addressing some advanced prompting, which is prompt templates. The first one was ICIO, instruction, context, input, and output. Then we addressed prompt calibration, which is RACA. We were discussing how RACA is important because it helps us measure the answers of these LLMs on a scale of relevance, accuracy, completeness, clearly communication, coherent response, and of course, appropriate information, all right? So this one, it seems a little bit more complicated, all right? Let's try to address it on a more basic level, all right? So what does RACA looks like in action, all right? So whenever you are presented with the answer of a large language model, try to ask yourself, is this answer better than a Google search? Because most of the time, people are asking questions that you can find at Google, all right? So is it that relevant that I'm using this large language model for a Google-worthy search? Because if you're receiving the exact same stimulus as a Google search, well, what are you using ChatGPT for? What are you using Gemini for? That's a very, very specific question that we have to ask. So is it relevant? Is it actually relevant? Because if not, well, maybe you did not present the right prompt, all right? Then we have the second question. Is it real data or just a misunderstanding / hallucination, all right? This means how accurate the information is. Because remember, sometimes large language models can hallucinate. Sometimes large language models can lie. They can invent information. So is this information, is this answer accurate? You have to ask that. Then we have the third question. Is it the type of answer you were expecting? Is it complete? Do the answer present all the information that you were looking for, how you wanted it to be presented? Because it might be that you did not specify how you wanted the answer to be presented. And that might be the reason it's not completed, all right? Most of the time, the bad performance of an LLM, it's because we did not present it our prompt correctly, because we did not ask the right question. We did not provide enough context for the task. So we have to be very present about thinking and analyzing how the answer is presented, because it has more to do with us than it has to do with ChatGPT or Gemini or any AI model, all right? So then we have the fourth question. Is the answer presented in an interpretable manner? All right, is it clear? Because let's think that, for example, I'm asking ChatGPT what quantum physics are, all right? Of course, if I don't tell ChatGPT that I am not a quantum physicist, that I do not have any prior experience with quantum physics, and that I am a complete beginner on the matter, ChatGPT can present very complex information, very complex wording, and advanced concepts that I will not understand at all. And I want you to think, what would that imply? If you are presented with complex information that you cannot understand, what do you do next? ChatGPT, please explain these concepts. And that means you're using another prompt. That means you're using another enter. Remember, fewer enters, fewer prompts means better communication. If we have a clear view on what we want and how to approach problem-solving situations, we can furthermore get better at this prompting phenomenon, at this prompting communication in interaction with computers, all right? So we have then the question of, does it make sense, all right? Is it coherent? Because sometimes, again, the response large language models have, it's just a compound of information. Sometimes it's not very well structured, and we can interpret that as not being coherent. So you have to ask yourself, does it make sense? Because if not, well, we have to refine our prompt in order to avoid these situations. And lastly, we have to ask ourselves, does it serve the purpose? Is it appropriate, all right, to my needs, to my objectives? Because let's think, if I want to avoid, let's say, if I want to avoid writing an email, and I end up having a long conversation with ChatGPT, correcting the answer the model is presenting for an email that I copied and pasted in order to receive an answer on ChatGPT to copy and paste for my email. But sometimes these interactions delve into a longer conversation, explaining context, coming back to the problem. And that's why most people tend to give up on AI. They're like, it's not working. It's not serving the purpose. This was meant to be fast. This was meant to be like magic. And suddenly I'm trying to explain something. I don't want to explain something. I don't want to talk. I don't want to have conversations. Most people get frustrated at this level because communication is a human aspect. It's a human, it's a human thing, all right? We're communicating. We are getting frustrated because we are not communicating what we want to share. And this is something we are all familiar with. At least once, I'm sure you have been in a conversation in which the other person is not understanding you. You're not communicating correctly. The idea is not being well received, and it's frustrating. Now try to translate that to the interaction with ChatGPT or Gemini or any other product of the matter. What does this frustration look like? It looks like people saying it doesn't work. It's not useful. It should have been easier and it's hard. I don't want to use it. So as you can see, this model, this template for prompt calibration, it's more about asking ourselves questions rather than evaluating the answer. Of course, it's a compound exercise. We're evaluating the answers while at the same time re-asking ourselves these important questions about the matter, about the information we're trying to exchange, about the task we want this model to perform, or about the problem that we are ultimately trying to solve, all right? So that's RACA: relevant, accurate, complete, clear, coherent, and of course, appropriate, all right? So at this point, please refrain to the survey again. I want to ask you something. Do you think that by interacting with AI, you can enhance your communication skills? This is very interesting because most people think about the main product of these interactions, which is saving time, saving money, increasing quality, or increasing production or productivity. But we tend to avoid the more subtle repercussions of this new technology or the usage of this technology. So one of them might be that while iteratively, as we addressed in Kaizen prompting, if we iteratively are communicating with a large language model, that means that we are at a very cognitive level, constantly communicating with a platform that needs us to communicate clearly, all right? So do you think that by using these large language models or AI platforms, people can enhance their communication skills? And this is quite interesting because most people tend to, and this is a very, very specific and fun example, most people were very critical about people using computers at a very early age, all right? And most people were focusing on very noticeable changes or outcomes of this situation. But what we tend to avoid looking at was the subtle changes, which was that people were very proficient at using keywords, all right? And this is interesting. A very simple keyword. Try to present a keyword to a, let's say, 11 to 15-year-old person, all right? They do not know how to use a keyboard properly because they were iPad babies. They are very proficient at iOS. They are very proficient at touch interfaces. Of course, they are the future. I'm not denying that. But it feels very weird that a very simple communication tool, it's not part of their skills because they were raised using another type of technology. So as long as we are communicating, it doesn't matter if we are typing or dictating, we have to be very good at communication. So I ask you again, do you think that by interacting with AI, you can enhance your communication skills? And for that matter, we have to address conversational prompting. What's conversational prompting? Well, it means a prompting approach that involves a more conversational approach, all right? And we have to ask two very specific questions and try to think of an answer, all right? And please, if you can help me answering back there, it would be amazing because this is very interesting. Communication-wise, are there any magic words that we can use in order to communicate better? And how can I avoid you confusing male or female subjects when communicating? All right. So, is there anyone that wants to participate and provide an answer to any of these questions? Remember, communication-wise, are there magic words? And the other question is, how can I avoid you confusing male or female subjects? Does someone want to participate? I'm not listening. If you're talking, I'm not listening. Sorry.
Go on, Purav.
Okay. So addressing these questions, it's not a matter of perception. Actually, it can be proved by science, by research, by experimentation. So to answer these questions, we have to address two research projects. The first one is large language models understand and can be enhanced by emotional stimuli, all right? It was presented by Cheng Li in 2023, and he created the concept of emotional prompting. If we present information at a conversational level in a communicational matter with AI, and we used emotional prompting, we can have better answers. And what can be emotional prompting? It goes from something as simple as asking, please. Literally, asking please to Gemini, to ChatGPT. The performance enhances. And it's something as simple as asking please and saying thank you, and something as complex as explaining to these models why this task is important for me. Maybe it's important for my final exam. It's important because I'm having a bad time and this will cheer me up. It's important because it will save me time in order to spend more time with my family. If we can share this information in a conversational way, the AI models understand and react accordingly. So guess what? There are magic words to communicate, and we know this. We know how to ask something in order to have better answers for this asking. We ask, please. It's a very human aspect of the communication process, and we all are familiar with that. And the second one is, how can we avoid people confusing female or male subjects when having a conversation or when talking? And that's a very specific problem that I'm addressing in my upcoming research project, Women in Tech, Female STEM Students, Perception on AI Gender Bias and How to Mitigate It, a case study in which I discovered this phenomenon called, or that I'm calling, gender neutral prompting, which is that whenever you are prompting, which is communication with an LLM or AI, you have to talk about people, not female or male subjects, people, because these models have a very strong gender bias due to their training data, all right? And if we have a biased training data, and then we use a biased communication stand, we are gonna have repeatedly biased answers, all right? So try to think of any question that you have presented to ChatGPT about people and think about, let's say, if you communicated in female or male terms, do you think that has an impact on the answers? And according to my research, whenever you are approaching a gender biased context or problem, if you approach it with gender neutral prompting, you receive a 700% improvement on the answers. 700 improvement percent. Only by using people instead of male or female. So it's very important to understand that communication has an impact on the experience, the interaction. How we communicate impacts how people react and how answers are presented. So we have emotional prompting and we have gender neutral prompting. This is the communicational aspect of prompting, all right? So, can you help me answering on the survey, please? How do you use ChatGPT? Because we might be familiar with many use cases of ChatGPT. Sometimes we use it in a way, sometimes we use it in another. But try to think, what's the main use you have for ChatGPT? Whether it is a very mundane, mechanical, and repetitive task that you have to perform every day, in which an AI model comes in handy, of course. Or if it's a more complex task that requires you to be participating in the process instead of just delegating it. Try to think, how do you use it? And of course, what it implies to you. Because how you use ChatGPT says more about your approach to the platform than the platform itself. All right? So how do you use ChatGPT? Now, if you have already answered, let's move on. Thank you very much. Magic words when communicating. So what do you use ChatGPT for? What is ChatGPT for you? And why are you using ChatGPT? Most people are using it as a novelty. And I want to be very clear. It's not about right or wrong. It's not binary. It's just about asking ourselves, what are we doing with technology? What are we doing with these tools? Because I have a saying, and it's very clear. AI has only two ways of acting, all right? AI has only two tasks to be done. Whether you use it or it uses you. It's very simple. If you're not using it correctly, AI, it's only learning from your behavioral patterns, improving itself. But if you are conscious about how it works and how to use it better, then you are using AI and not the other way around. Try to think about that. All these people are using ChatGPT for fun or for questions or for experimentation without paying attention on how to use it better, how to take advantage of this very well designed and advanced tool. They're just serving AI to learn how humans interact and behave. And try to think about this. What was the first thing you asked ChatGPT when you use it? Try to think. What was the first thing you did with an AI that was presented to you as an advanced AI that can answer as a human, with which you can have an interaction, a communication, a conversation? What did you do? Did you ask a question? Did you begin a conversation? Or did you deliver an order? Did you use it to work for you? Did you use it to make you the homework or something? We have to ask ourselves, what are we doing with these tools? What do you use ChatGPT for? What is ChatGPT for you? And why are you using it? And that leads us to ChatGPT roleplay, all right? ChatGPT roleplay means that we have to be constantly asking ourselves, who are you talking with, right? Are you sure you know everything? And of course, how can you be sure that the data is real, all right? And there's a very simple way of explaining this. There's a saying here in Mexico that proposes a very weird and interesting situation that says, we all have this not so bright cousin in our families, all right? And if you cannot think of this very specific not so bright cousin, be careful, because you might be that not so bright cousin in your family. And this fun saying helped me establish a very specific situation, which is whenever you're asking, or whenever I'm asking something to ChatGPT, I ask myself, do I want my not so bright cousin to be answering this question? And if the answer is no, it poses me to establish, ChatGPT, I want you to be this person. Because if I do not define the role ChatGPT will be taking in the conversation, how can I be sure I'm talking with the person I want to be talking? So it's about profiling. It's about role playing. Then we have to ask ourselves, do we know everything? Because ChatGPT can replicate a lot of things, but certainly there's one that remains human. And it's something that we humans have and no other computer can replicate, which is human error. So we have to be quite present about the human error that we as humans have. And that might be something as simple as missing something, as not explaining something, not providing enough context. And if we assume that we do not hold all the truth about something, if we assume that we are prone to missing information, then we can use ChatGPT to cover those gaps. Then we can use AI models to help us see what we didn't saw. And that's interesting because it all comes from this question. Are you sure you know everything? Because if I don't know everything, I want my AI model to be asking questions that I'm not asking. And lastly, how can you be sure that the data is real? We rely on this technology the same way, and it's amazing because we're not new to these phenomena. Do you remember when Wikipedia was the boom? When Wikipedia was the most amazing thing on the internet? Why? Because it has all the information. And then most people tend to learn the hard way that not all information that was available at Wikipedia was real or official. And it's not about criticizing the platform. It's about thinking on how people perceive the information. When you assume that everything's real, you stop asking questions. And that's very dangerous. So you have to ask yourself, how can I be sure that this data is real? And it comes at something as simple as establishing this instruction. So this is role playing, PRA. This is how you can use ChatGPT or Gemini or any AI model as a consultant. Because this is very interesting. Most people use AI models for answers. But what happens when you use an AI model to question you? Well, you're designing your very own consultant, someone that's going to be challenging your ideas, someone that's gonna be challenging your concepts, someone that's gonna be asking the questions that you did not ask. All right. So what's PRI? It's profiling, role, and instruction. So profiling, specify whom you want to talk with, what type of person, with what type of specialization, with what type of point of view, what criteria. You have the ability to program the very person you need. So we have to use that ability. We have to train that ability, because the better we become at profiling, the better we're going to be interacting with these AI models. Imagine having the very best specialist on any matter that you have a problem with, and the ability to talk to this person. It's amazing. We have to be focused on that matter. Pay attention to that, because that's the advancement of the conversational interface of the AI generation. All right. So profiling, specify whom you want to be talking with. Role, provide a question before any answer. If you instruct any AI model to provide a question before any answer, you will see an improvement in your workflow. You have no idea how much your workflow is going to be improving, because you're gonna be asking yourself constantly, what question with your prompt trigger, and that poses you a new approach, which is thinking about what you were not thinking, all derived from having your very own consultant. All right. And lastly, we have instruction. It's very simple. If you do not want AI to lie, you can at least mitigate the problem, because it's not a for sure solution, but I'm sure, and I can assure you, it mitigates the problem. If you specifically state, do not lie, and provide sources, because that way you can be sure that, first of all, you were clear in which you did not want any lies in the information. And secondly, you are asking for sources for you to check, and that way you can be sure. All right. Because remember, the problem with Wikipedia was not that the information was not reliable. The problem with Wikipedia was that people were assuming all information was real. They were not challenging any ideas. They were not checking the sources, because if they have done so, they would have noticed, well, this do not have a source. This is not backed by any information, and this source does not exist. Try to think about this as a systemic problem. It's not just the, let's say, it's not the symptom. It's the disease. We have to think about the bigger problem, not just the consequence. All right. And I want you to help me in the questionnaire, in the survey, and answer the Likert scale that we have on this very specific question, which is, do you adapt your objectives or your behavior? All right. What do? You adapt your objectives to how do you behave, or you try to change your behavior in order to achieve your objectives? This is a very personal question that most of the time we're not asking ourselves, but it's very important whenever we are addressing behavioral aspects of anything. Because if we do not have the ability or the notion to adapt ourselves in order to achieve our objectives, we're only going to be adapting our objectives to our behavior. And that's not the best way of doing things. All right. So I would like to take a moment now that we have surpassed the first hour of the workshop. And I would like to ask, how are we doing back there? Are you having any troubles with the survey? Any questions so far? We are almost at the last part of the workshop. If we can have any interactions or you have any questions, please feel free to participate. I would like to have a conversation with you guys, if possible, of course.
Any questions?
Sorry?
How do I get on the survey? I just came here a bit late.
So we have some people that arrived late. If you can share the QR code again for the...
So is anyone having a hard time with the survey? Sorry, or do you want me to go back to the QR code?
QR code, yes, because
All right.
some
We can make a stop so
understand.
far and go back to that. So first, you have to answer this survey, please. This is the registry survey. Use your birth date, since it will be your identification in order to link your registry information with your behavioral information. So this is the registry survey, and I will give you time for you guys to answer it. Remember, there's a very important last question that tries to address how would you resolve a problem, all right? Which is a problem-solving situation that it's important because it can present to you a problem, and the challenge is to address the best order, according to you, on how to approach the problem to achieve the best outcome or the best result, all right? So if you have already covered the registry survey, which is this QR code or this link, all right? If you have a hard time scanning, you can go by typing the short link. I opted for the shorter version for you guys to be able to copy it without any problem. So do you guys want me to go back to the other survey, or are we still on the registry survey? Sorry?
Just one more minute on this one.
All right, we can take time, don't worry. I hope you guys are having fun with this workshop, or at least are asking yourself different or new questions about how we are using these tools. And hopefully you can you can leave this workshop at least with new questions. That would be amazing for me. We're always looking for questions. Remember, answers are not important. Asking ourselves is what drives us to the future.
Any questions regarding the content?
All right.
I think you can move to the other QR code.
All right, excellent. I'm gonna move back to the other, and I'm gonna perform a recap on what we have covered so far. All right. So this is the QR code for the workshop survey. Again, pay attention to your birth date, since it is your identification to link your registry and behavioral data. And I'm gonna be recapping what we have covered, because remember, we have to be answering the questions in the order they are going to be presented. All right, please try to not advance on the questions before I present them, and feel free to answer completely with complete honesty. There's no right or wrong answers. I want to address your perceptions, your ideas, your thoughts. What do you think about something, regardless of if it's right or wrong? Because this is a new technology that most of the time it's not well defined by or for anyone or for everyone. And I think it's more important to address people's perception rather than right or wrong answers. All right. So this is the survey. You can scan the QR code or use this short link again. And if you allow me, I'm going to be moving on to every question that we have covered so far. All right. So we began with what is prompting. Please try to answer in whatever way you feel better or comfortable. Whether it is a short answer or rather it is a longer answer, as long as you're okay with it, try to answer honestly. All right. So first question, what is prompting? Then we moved on to what is engineering, for us to furthermore explain and define what is prompt engineering. So the second question is, what is engineering for you? Then we have the third question, which is, what is prompt engineering for you? Okay, try to think not about the right or the specific definition. Try to think what it is for you or to you, or what do you perceive it as, right? Then we have the next question, which is, how do you prompt? All right, and try to think if you have any specific structure or method whenever you are prompting or using an AI model or AI platform, or if you are just free formatting everything, or if you do not have any specific formatting and you're just typing away and see what happens, all right? Then we have the next question, which is, do you think that by interacting with AI, you can enhance your communication skills? And I'm gonna make a stop here because there's an anecdote that's gonna be very good for explaining how communication can be affected. And pay attention, because it's an affection. We cannot address it as good or bad. It's an affection whenever we are interacting with AI on a conversational level. So have you ever heard or experienced this phenomenon for people between, let's say, 9 years old to 15 years old, all right? From 9 to 15 years old. This phenomenon of these younger people, these younger generations, not saying please and thank you. Have you ever experienced this phenomenon or heard about this phenomenon? And of course, I mean, it sounds like this older person talking about the younger generations and things not being the way they used to be. And it's not like that. Because what if I told you that these generations were the ones that grew up with Alexa? And try to think about it. Do we ask AI for things saying please and thank you? Because if we do not, we're going to be missing that conversational aspect, because the things we do, they are reinforced. The things we do not do, they get atrophied. And that's very important, because we're not paying attention to what we are not doing. We're paying attention to everything we can do and all the potential and all the benefits, but we're not paying attention to what we are not doing and what we are missing out. So do you think that by interacting with AI, you can enhance your communicational skills? And we then asked, how do you use ChatGPT? You're going to see and find some options. Try to think if one of them fits the most widely used you give to ChatGPT or AI or Gemini or Perplexity or Claude, etc. Whatever, whichever you are using, try to think, how do you use it? Sorry in advance if I asked for ChatGPT specifically. As we all know, it's the most widely used of all these platforms. But whichever platform you're using, try to think how you are using it, all right? And we're covering this question about, do you adapt your objectives or your behavior? You're going to find a Likert scale that's going to be very helpful to measure your perception on this matter. So, do you adapt your objectives or your behavior? What's the general consensus back there? What do you guys think? Do you adapt your objectives or your behavior?
Behavior.
Behavior, right? Because if we adapt our behavior, we are adapting the first step of the problem-solving process. The objective is the goal. If we are adapting the goal, we are adapting in advance. So the right way to achieve an optimal performance is to adapt what comes first, because that lets us to better performance, to better answers, and of course, to better objectives, or to achieve objectives for that matter, all right? Prompt-oriented behavior, it's what I want to present to you guys, all right? Prompt-oriented behavior, it's, I hope, something you have never heard of, all right? And I'm going to be presenting it to you, and then I want you to form your own conclusion on the matter, all right? Please do not take my word as the law, all right? I want you guys to use this as a concept presentation, but I want you guys to think what it represents to you, or how do you interpret it with everything that we cover in the workshop, all right? So, prompt-oriented behavior, problem-solving approach through prompting with conversational focus and systemic application, adapting our behavior to enhance AI interactions with better answers and fewer prompts. All right? So let's use a very simple example, and this is completely real. And I think, let's see if I'm right or wrong. I think you will be able to feel familiar with this situation, because I'm sure everyone here has experienced something at least similar at some level, all right? So let's say that someone's using an AI model, all right? For this example, we're gonna be talking about Midjourney, all right? So someone is using Midjourney and asks for an image of people, all right? In an office environment with office attire, in the coffee room, all right? So try to picture this idea, try to picture this image that we're asking Midjourney to perform, all right? So as expected, the image comes in seconds, and it's amazing. And of course, it saves the designer, because we're talking about a situation that happened at a marketing agency, all right? And of course, the designer was very pleased with the result, even though, all right, try to picture the image, and the people are standing, all right? And almost at the bottom, or on the lower section of the image, we have the hands of these people on the image. And what do you think the hands look like? Because I'm sure you know what happens with AI whenever someone asks for an image that involves hands. So what do you think happened? The hands were completely good, or they had some problems?
Too many fingers.
The hands were all completely wrong and badly designed, all right? So the designer came up with this amazing simple solution. She was like, the image works. Why? Because I can take it and edit it to short the image and to avoid showing the hands, all right? That seems like a right answer. But then again, we're not Kaizen prompting, because the right way to solve this problem would be, what could I have put on my prompt to avoid the situation? And it comes to specifying in the prompt, avoid showing hands, because that way I'm prompting a solution to avoid me working on a vision on the image. All right, does it make sense? Are you having a clear view on what prompt-oriented behavior is? All right, so we have to think backwards in order to perform better. And this is part of what prompt-oriented behavior is. Try to think about AI models like the automation part of the problem-solving process, all right? The automated part. Because everything that happens afterwards, we're working with an AI model, it's completely automated. So we do not have to worry about writing, compending information, presenting information, resuming information, extending information, all these conversational or writing aspects of AI, or even processing information. What we have to focus on, it's on the prior steps, which is, what information do we use? How do we present the problem? How rich the context is for us to present the problem in a better way. So we have to pay attention to the backwards aspect of the problem and not the solution. And this is going to be presented as following, all right? POV, it's part of a concept that I call cognitive labor, all right? So we're all familiar with manufacturing, all right? Manufacturing, it's a solution approach to problem solving with focus on the solution itself, its process and methodologies, as forward thinking, all right? Whenever we're thinking about manufacturing, we're thinking towards the objective, towards the end goal, all right? But this is how I came up with this concept, and it's very interesting. If you're familiar with engineering, I'm sure you have heard or are familiar with the concept of reverse engineering. And what's reverse engineering? It's addressing an engineering process backwards. And this results in a better understanding of the problem, in an enhancing of the process, and furthermore, a better outcome if performed correctly. So what's cognitive labor? Cognitive labor is a solution approach to problem solving with focus on the problem itself, its context, its sources, and main objectives as backwards thinking. The better defined the problem is, the easier we can find the solution or the answer. So I want to think about manufacturing and cognitive labor as two different sides of this problem solving lane. Some situations call for manufacturing approach to problem solving. But most of the time when we are using or interacting with AI, cognitive labor comes in handy. The backwards we think, the more backwards we think, the better we present the problem. Because it means fewer prompts, and remember, fewer enters when interacting, and that's optimal usage. All right? Any question so far? Because we're going to begin the last part of the workshop, and we're addressing the most important parts or concepts of the topic. So any questions so far?
No, we can continue. We can move on.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. All right, so what's prompt-oriented behavior? We can define prompt-oriented behavior as a set of questions and, of course, concepts, all right? Which is the base, the extras, raw materials, and, of course, deliverables, all right? And we can address these concepts with simple questions like, what's the point of the task? Because we try to think that the solution, that the objective, it's the end of the process when we can be constantly improving, all right? So instead of thinking, oh, I want an image that I then can edit, we have to think, no, I want to avoid spending time on this task. So that's the main objective. That's why it becomes important to prompt correctly in order to avoid reworking. Because if we're using a tool to work more, well, clearly we're not using it correctly. And I'm not telling you guys, I want to be very clear. I'm not telling you to avoid working. I'm not telling you to avoid involving yourself in the process. I'm not telling you to become lazy. I'm asking you to approach everything at an engineering level, using prompt engineering, trying to solve problems more efficiently. That's the question. I want you to ask yourself questions. I want you to challenge your ideas. I want you to rethink about the problem in order to perform better. Because remember, the tools are one part of this interaction. The human aspect, it's the one that has all the responsibility, and that's what we have to pay attention to. So we have base. What's the point of the task? We have extras, elements needed to be complied with. Do we have any instructions? Do we have any limitations? Do we have some contextual information that might come in handy for the task to be performed better? These are very simple questions. Then we have raw materials. What will you be working with? Try to think about giving instructions to someone without information, all right? So try to think, make a resume. That's the task. A resume of what? You did not provide the information. So you're not providing instructions. You're just rumbling orders. And an order is not an instruction. We have to be clear. So raw materials, what will you be working with? We have to provide sources, all right? Source material, information to use, because if not, we are leaving the criteria to find information on the internet, and we do not have control on that. We have to be very clear. And lastly, deliverables. How is it expected deliverable defined, all right? What do I want to be receiving? What do I need to receive? What I want this AI to perform for? Because if we do not establish that, we cannot measure the answer as good or bad. We're not clear even on our expectations, so we cannot state that something is good or wrong, all right? So are you seeing the patterns here? How can you define this prompt-oriented behavior better? Does it resemble something that you know? Try to think about it. Base, extras, raw material, deliverables. Does it seem familiar? Anyone?
Could you repeat the question?
Does it seem familiar? This concept of prompt-oriented behavior based on base, extras, raw materials, and deliverables. Does it seem familiar? Because if not, I can show you, and it's going to be amazing. Because, well, what's the base? It's instruction. What's the extra? The context. What are raw materials? The input. And what's deliverables? the output. So as you can see, the behavior, it's well related to the prompting phenomenon itself. It's adapting our behavior or our approach to problem solving, thinking about prompts. And another way we can explain this phenomenon is with two specific examples. First, try to think the first time you learned how to use Excel. Try to remember that magical moment in which you learn how to use pivot tables or formulas or manage information or databases, and how suddenly everything seemed Excel worthy. All right. So if we are planning a trip, I can make an Excel about that. If we're planning a party, I can make an Excel about that. Do we have a trip list of things that we have to have in order? I can make an Excel about that. How simple problem solving began looking when we learned a new tool for problem solving. And that comes again to our behavior. How do we use Google? Because remember, none of us took a Google course. None of us received a proper instruction on how to use Google. Yet we know how to use it. But it means we are adapting our behavior, not our objectives. How do we use Google? With keywords. Not because humans use keywords, because Google search engine works with keywords. And that's how we think. We adapted our way of thinking, our way of communicating. So I know that I do not have to ask a direct question on Google to receive the answer. I do not have to ask what is quantum physics. I can only write quantum physics because those are the keywords. I'm not communicating at a conversational level. I'm communicating with keywords at a SEO level, at a search engine optimization level. And that happens. And another example would be, have you ever been in this situation in which you're talking with someone and suddenly, randomly, this person talking with you, not typing, not using the platform, talking with you says hashtag. All right. So how are we doing today? Hashtag Tech Forum. People using hashtags in their conversation, in their way of communicating. That's using communication from Twitter in our daily lives. That's how we change our communication. That's the phenomenon. All right. So once we have addressed prompt-oriented behavior as instruction, context, input, and output, or rather as an evolution of the ICO template applied on a behavioral level, we can define prompt-oriented behavior as how cognitive processes change based on conversational interactions. All right. Predicting prompting responses, calibrating the best conversational approach, modifying your behavior in order to align it to your objectives through prompting. And this is something that we are familiar with. We all know someone who we have to approach in a certain way, someone that we know how to present an idea or information in order to be better well received. That's prompting. We're thinking how to improve the outcome based on our conversation. We're constantly doing that. We have to understand that this is not something new. The approach in which we'll be applying this information or this knowledge might be new because we're talking about AI. But it's a human interaction. It's a human thing, communication, all right? So, in conclusion, prompting, it's communication. That's how we can address it because we are more often than not performing prompting on conversational interfaces, which is communication itself. Then we have prompt engineering, which is systemic approach to problem solving through prompts, of course. Then we have advanced prompting, which involves conversational prompting. How can we enhance our conversational interactions in order to achieve better responses? Then we have ChatGPT roleplay, in which we learn how to use ChatGPT as a consultant. This is going to be very useful for you guys. Trust me, the moment you start using ChatGPT to ask you questions instead of providing answers, you're advancing on the next level. Trust me, it's amazing. And of course, we closed with POV, which is adapting our behavior to our objectives. All right? So lastly, I would like you guys to help me on the last question, which is, how would you describe prompt-oriented behavior? And I want to know what you guys think, what your perception of the concept is. Try not to be completely biased by what I told you. Do not use my exact words. Please do not feel limited about that. Try to answer freely. I want to understand what you perceive as prompt-oriented behavior, or at least what you understood about prompt-oriented behavior, having covering all the information in this workshop. All right? And of course, remember, there's the last question about how would you address the problem-solving situation, whether it is by thinking forward or thinking backwards in order to have a better outcome. The problem-solving situation of the groceries menu list that you have on the survey, all right? So try to answer, how would you describe prompt-oriented behavior? And lastly, the problem-solving situation, all right? And if we are done with that part, we can cover a little bit about the digital twin activity that I can share with you guys, which is going to be very interesting to perform, because it's not about the digital twin itself, but it's about the experience of programming a digital twin and how it enhances your approach to situations. It's going to be very simple and fun to have. All right. At this point, I would like to ask, are you guys done with the survey?
Yes.
Is everyone done with the survey? All right. Yes. Excellent. Let me check. Let me see if I can have the answers to see what you guys have been answering. I have 12 responses for the workshop registry and only 5 registries for the workshop itself. All right, is anyone missing? I repeat, I have 12 people registered on the workshop registry survey and 5 people on the workshop survey itself. Maybe it's because some of you haven't finished, so I'm gonna give you some time. And so far, let me see if I have some answers that I can share with you. All right, so let's see what we have now. From the people that have already finished the survey, we have 3 people answering that they do prompt with a structure, and 2 answered that they do not have any particular method of prompting. All right. Then we have the question of, do you think that by interacting with AI, you can enhance your communication skills? All of you agreed. 2 strongly agree. 3 agreed simply. So we have this understanding of the impact of prompting on communication, first of all. So that's very obvious. And thank you very much for your answers. Then we can move on to, how do you use ChatGPT, or which is the use case more predominant for your interactions? And we have the search engine usage, basically using it as a Google substitute. Then we have as a tool to automate mechanical or mundane tasks. Someone else answered that they use it as a guidance for corrections and reviews. Someone answered that they use it for all of the above, which it's quite interesting. Some people use it on or predominantly on one aspect, and someone else's used all these aspects. All right. And lastly, we have some of you answering that others. All right. Then we have the problem-solving stance, which presented mixed answers on adapting behavior. 20% answered they disagree with adapting their behavior to the objectives. 40% agreed. And on adapting my objectives to my behavior, 20% strongly disagree. The other 20% disagree. 40% felt neutral about the stance, and 20% agreed. All right. Then we have the problem-solving situation. All right. And this is important because we can see how we perceive the importance or the order of these steps in order to achieve a better outcome. All right. So I'm not going to be answering or providing any input because I'm going to be leaving you guys to finish answering the survey. But so far, you can see that it's very interesting and important to address this problem, or at least ask the right questions to ask ourselves how we are using these tools, or if we have any space or chance to improvement. All right. So I'm going to be coming back to the digital twin exercise. This is we're going to be having two options to perform. All right. The first one is for designing a digital twin of a professor. This one can be performed with your students if you are professors. And the other one is to create a digital twin from yourself in order to have your personal consultant based on you. All right. So for the professor aspect, it's a 4 steps interaction. It's very simple. You're going to be instructing your students to design their perfect professor. All right. So the first thing that we have to design is the academic aspect. All right. So you have to design or write down what academic experience this person is going to have, whether it has just a degree, a master's degree, a doctorate, or any certifications, or any major or specializations that are going to be important or useful for the purpose that you're looking for. All right. Then you have to define the working experience or the professional experience this person has. All right. And as you can see, it's important to be talking about people or persons. All right. We're not talking about female teachers or male teachers. It's important. All right. So what's the professional experience of this person? What position this person has and what type of company you want this person to have experience working with, whether it is a local company, a multinational company, a very niche industry company, at what level of position you want this person to have experience with. And once you have defined the professional experience, you can address the third part, which is the teaching approach. And this is about how do you want this teacher to behave? Whether you want this teacher, this professor, to provide simple to understand examples. Do you want this professor to provide definitions of words? Do you want this professor to use a more complex, advanced, or technical language? Or do you want this professor to explain everything with, let's say, with rhymes? So that's a very, very exaggerated example, but I think you're getting an idea. We're defining the teaching method this ideal professor is going to have. And lastly, the fourth part, it's about profiling us as students, all right? So maybe this is the second time I'm taking this course because I failed last time. That's an important aspect of me. That's important context. So keep in mind, I failed this subject and I'm taking it for a second time. Or keep in mind that this subject, it's predominantly about math and I'm very bad at math. Or keep in mind that I am neurodivergent and I need you to teach me properly in different ways. All right. So we have defined this digital twin covering four important aspects. First, academic experience. Second, professional or working experience. Third, the teaching approach of how we want this professor to approach the teaching process. And fourth, defining us as the participants for this professor or teacher to perform better. And that way we can program our very own digital tutor, all right? But this is called digital twin, right? And it's important to understand, this is one approach, defining, designing, programming our very own ideal professor. But let's say you do have your ideal professor, and this professor happens to be a real professor at your university. We all know some sort of professor that is widely recognized by every student as the best teacher, the one that explains everything in the clearest way, the one with the funniest class, the most interesting subjects, etc., etc. So let's think about that. If we do have a real subject that we can copy, well, it becomes a very simple task because we have two options. One, if we can get, because sometimes universities provide this to the students. If not, we have the second way, right? The first way would be to get a grasp on this professor's curriculum. If we get a curriculum of this professor, we can replicate all his experience, all his expertise, all his specializations in order to replicate his or her thought, his or her criteria, his or her approach, because that would ensure that we will be replicating a very good professor that has a very good review, all right? The other one would be to visit LinkedIn and try to find this professor's profile. And as simple as trying to copy information from that profile, we can address academic experience, work experience, and some other aspects, personal aspects or professional aspects of this person. And that way we can create a digital twin of a very specific professor. All right? So this is very interesting because you can teach your students about this. And guess what? Most of you, I'm sure, have have known or have had any situation in which this ethical aspect of artificial intelligence, or more specifically ChatGPT, comes to the table, right? So, interestingly enough, if we present AI, let's say ChatGPT for the example, if we present ChatGPT as an answering machine that does nothing else rather than doing what we tell it to do, it's not a surprise. It's not a surprise for me, at least, that students are using ChatGPT to do their homework, because it was presented as a solution platform, and sometimes they have many problems, many tasks that need to be solved. So they're approaching ChatGPT avoiding work. But when you present this tool or this technology for students as something more complex, and you teach them how to perform a digital twin of a professor, or how to design their very own professor, ideal professor, something interesting happens. In my experience with my students, in many subjects that I have run this experiment, my students began using ChatGPT or this digital twin to create practice tests prior to an exam. Try to think about this. The tool was presented as something more, and as a consequence, they used it for something more. No longer, my students at least, have to be studying, just reading and reading and repeating and memorizing and reading and memorizing. No. They can have their very own personal and personalized tutor, which is available 24/7 to help them study, whether it is by simplifying concepts, whether it is by presenting a round of questions, or by performing a pop quiz or a test exam or a practice test. And it all comes back to how do we present these tools. And remember, the same way we did not have any instructions on how to use Google, most people are not having instructions on how to use AI platforms. They think they are prompting and they just rambling words. They think they are receiving the best outcome because they do not have the tools to measure the outcome. We have to empower people through technology, because if not, people are going to be atrophied. And that's the downside of not knowing what we are doing. And the other aspect of the digital twin comes from copying yourself. Imagine creating a digital twin of yourself with all your information, whatever you think it's important in order to solve problems or to take decisions, because we have all been presented to situations in which we have to make a decision, and sometimes we are not that sure. And of course, I'm not telling you to substitute any other way of asking you dilemmas or solving these types of situations, or by only using these AI models. It's just another tool, another option to approach these problems, which is asking yourself, what would you do without having emotions, without having bias, and with the ability to portray the objective in a clear way, the situation in a clear way, the complete context, to look for what would be the best decision. That way you can ask yourself, am I taking the best decision? Am I thinking this with my heart or with my head? Am I using feelings or logic? etc., etc. And this is an amazing experience because imagine having the best version of yourself to ask you questions, not to substitute you, not to replace you, to ask you questions. And this is what a digital twin does for you whenever you are prompting it correctly. All right? So that would be all for this session. I would like to ask if there are any questions regarding the surveys, regarding the workshop, regarding the topic, any comments, any questions, whatever you would like to share, I would be more than willing to answer and talk with you guys.
Any questions?
How did your students make the digital tree?
Sorry, can you repeat that again? Sorry.
How do your students create the digital twin?
No, the teacher one.
All right. Most of my students opted for the second choice because at Tec de Monterrey, in which I am a professor, they have access to the, let's say, the general information of their professors, and sometimes they upload their curriculum. So it's very easy for them to try to replicate these profiles, or they can perform at least, this is the experience that they have shared with me, they can pay more attention to the first day of school in which most teachers present themselves. So that way you can get the most similar criteria, because this is important. If I'm taking a physics course, of course it seems appealing, of course it seems interesting and fitting to have, let's say, Albert Einstein as my personal tutor. Of course it makes sense. But at the end of the day, Einstein is not my professor. My professor is Professor Sanchez. And I would like to apply and abide to Professor Sanchez criteria because it's the person that I'm going to be interacting with in this course. All right. I mean, of course, as long as we have a good professor. That's why I told you it might be, or it must be someone with good reviews, with good performance, someone worth copying. Remember, we are trying to enhance human interactions, not substitute them. So we have to approach it using the best human point of view, the best human subject, not to replace it with just any type of artificial intelligence, assuming they are better. Does this make the situation clearer?
Yeah.
And what kind of prompt, I imagine, like you would use to create your the digital twin of the professor? What can you give some examples of prompts?
All right. So the prompt, the part we covered was the profiling. All right. It was the role playing aspect of it. But the whole prompt looks more like instructions, because try to think about you being the teaching director of this professor. So you can dictate how you want this professor to perform. So firstly, it would be like creating a GPT, which you can do in ChatGPT. Instead of just prompting it, you can program it. And other than this profiling, you can add different information, more context, more input, okay, enriching the prompt, which is, let's say, you can upload the PDF of the program. You can upload the PDF of the curriculum. You can upload the PDF of the book you will be using. And every day you can upload your notes of the class. So this digital tutor can provide you a more personalized and, of course, updated service. And this is part of the prompting, because prompting is not about just writing. As you can see, all these elements that I talked about, they are the input, they are the context. It can be uploaded. Some aspects can be specified in writing form, but some others can be defined with documents. So the prompt looks more like you will be, or you are, because you have to rephrase it as a conversation. All right. So you have the experience, the academic experience, the professional experience, the teaching approach, and your information. You then have to translate this information to a prompt, which looks more like you are a professor with 15 years of experience in the business industry, with a specialization in fintech, with an MBA, with a finance major, and you have experience in multinational companies, currently working as the CFO of a startup that specializes on fintech, and you are prominent in the fintech field. Also, you are very good at explaining complex concepts in an easier way with examples and definitions. Keep in mind that this is the second time I'm taking this course, and I would like to explain things for me in a more understandable way. Use the information from the PDF I'm uploading as curriculum to have an idea on the course we will be having. Take the information from the PDF label as course book, because it will be the book that we will be using on the course. And every day I will be updating your database with a new PDF covering the notes of the classes for you to perform on a more updated form. So as you can see, I'm literally describing something in a conversational way. That is the prompt. Does it look clearer now?
Yeah, that helped a lot.
Yes, thank you very much, Daniel. Any other questions?
Yeah, one last one. So how do you use AI to ask you questions about your project?
Ooh, excellent. All right. So the first thing would be to look for general questions, not very important or low importance questions, because the point is I want the AI model to tell me what I didn't saw. All right. So I have two examples. All right. The first one would be the first time I used, in this case, ChatGPT to create a class for a classroom. All right. And despite all the information I provided, the first question the model asked me was, what is the audience? Because at no point did I specify if the audience were first semester students or last semester students or advanced or beginners. And I noticed that it was the question the model was asking me because it was the information I did not provide it. So it helped me improve my prompting, trying to cover everything, or at least asking myself, what am I missing before typing enter on any prompt? Secondly, would be through this simple prompt of asking questions, all right? So let's say that, and this applies for any project, all right? Let's say that you are providing an AI model with instructions. How can you be sure that the instructions were understood? So you can add another prompt at the ending of any prompt that says, confirm that you understand, and confirm what you understand. And that way you can be sure what the instruction is being processed as, and you can correct before beginning working. Again, this results in fewer prompts, fewer interactions, more optimization. But then you can add this other prompt that we were talking about, which reads, provide a question before any answer. That way, you're gonna be receiving a question about what you're writing. And this poses a challenge to your ideas. Most of the time, when we're interacting with AI, guess what? We're interacting alone. So if I'm talking about my topics with my point of view, with my objectives as the priority, I'm only thinking for me, and I'm getting narrow and narrow and narrow, and I get blinded. What I need is someone else to ask me questions. And if I'm interacting with this conversational model, why not use it as that? So it's not about the answer itself. It's about helping us question ourselves. Because the more you exercise this consultant aspect of AI models with the question prompt, you become better. You start asking these questions to yourself before prompting them. And that's prompt-oriented behavior. You are changing and adapting your behavior in order to become better at prompting. So that would be the answer on how to address the consultant aspect or the questioning aspect of an AI model. Was the answer good, or do we have questions still on the matter?
No, it's okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Excellent.
Very much. Any other? Yes.
I have a question. So it's related to hallucination.
Thank you.
With a large language model like ChatGPT, like how do we, like based on of your experience as a from engineering, like is this prompt engineering can prevent this hallucination?
How can we prevent hallucination
Ooh.
with prompt engineering?
Excellent. First of all, it's amazing. Most people get frustrated whenever they are presented with false information on an AI model. And the first thing I ask them is, did you specify that you wanted real data and for the AI model not to lie? And most people react the way you're thinking. No one specified that you do not want lies in your information. So it's something
Simple as that.
It's something as simple as that. Of course, remember, this is not the absolute answer, but it sure helps mitigating the problem. Also, you have another type of approach, which derives from prompt-oriented behavior. You have to ask yourself, I'm asking a question, but where do I want this AI model to take the information for the answer? And then you can adapt your prompt and specify, please limit your answers to, let's say, Scopus-related information, Google Scholar information, to medical journals information. You can narrow the universe in which these AI models will be working on, all through prompt-oriented behavior, adapting your problem-solving approach in order to receive or achieve better answers or better outcomes. All right? Does it answer the question?
Yes, yes. Any other?
Excellent.
Okay, thank you very much, Daniel, for the very informative workshop. I think some of us will just go home and try to practice our prompt engineering skills. It was really useful. So maybe we'll organize something again in the future for our students, because I've seen that there is lots of interest from the students as well on this. So thank you very much, and this will conclude our summer school. It was like 3 very intensive days we had. Yeah, thank you very much for attending and engaging in our sessions.
That was also recorded. Is it possible to reduce the this bar here to a single one, so that we can also see a bit more of the screen?